All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening for Once Upon a Grant. So I'm Laura Tavares. I'm the administrator for Mosaic Lowell. For those of you who don't know Mosaic Lowell, we are the arts and culture and creative economy plan for the city of Lowell. We are a separate nonprofit organization operating under the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. We are not a city department. I do like to put that out there, though we do work very closely with the city. Um, and we have tons of one of the many things we do is professional development series. So I want to thank Sanary for joining us this evening. Sanary is a member of our executive committee. I had to stop for a minute, remember what we were calling it these days. Um, just joined as the new development manager for the Merrimack Repertory Theater. So now officially working in the arts, but she's a storyteller and a writer, and has been involved in the Lowell community for many, many years. Um, Another note, we are recording this. Recording will be sent out after, likely tomorrow. We will have a transcript as well, and also closed captioning is enabled um, for this meeting. So if you do need closed captioning, you can choose that option. And with that, we'll ask folks to mute themselves. Um, and with that, I'm going to toss it over to you, Sanary.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Mosaic Lowell for inviting me in to offer this workshop. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I am Sanary Phen, as Laura had mentioned. I've been working in Lowell nonprofits for quite some time. And I hope that this presentation will be useful to folks who are in the development world and looking to raise funds through grant writing. Laura, we can start with the slides and I'll go through. Okay, so a little bit more about me. I have been in the nonprofit field, mostly in the human services sector for more than probably 20 years now, with starting off as a youth peer leader right here in Lowell at the YWCA, and then transitioning into more direct care roles as a resident service coordinator for US Youth, and then transitioning to working with older adults and hitting some, I would say, barriers and finding assistance and support and resources for a lot of my clients. I decided that I would delve into a more advocacy role within administrations and nonprofits to see what kind of changes I could create or be a catalyst for. Other than that, at the heart of the things that I enjoy doing, or at the heart of who I really am, I'm actually, I'm very much a writer and storyteller by nature. I started writing really young. It's always been a really strong skill set for me. And I decided that within the nonprofit sector, I really wanted to be able to utilize this skill in a way that would be helpful to folks. And it brought me into the role of development work and grant writing. So I work very closely with the Cambodian American Literary Arts Association, which is a literary arts nonprofit looking to uplift Khmer Cambodian American writers in the diaspora and to help empower and educate multicultural communities through the literary arts. And all of the storytelling and artistry and writing stemmed from me really wanting to tell my mother's story. And from there, it lent to me wanting to be able to uplift the stories of folks in my community and advocate on their behalf. Okay, so we can go on to the next slide. So a little bit about what we're going to focus on today. We're really focused on the storytelling component when it comes to grant writing. I know that, Mosaic has some resources on their website for really like basic grant writing 101. I'm not really going to go through that. We're just going to, for the purpose of this workshop, basically state that you've already gone through the procurement and researched your grant. You fall in line with the funding requirements of your foundation or your grantor, and that you're ready to put your story together and put the best application you want to put that you can create forward. Okay. And then we're going to kind of go through the types of grant stories that most people write and what their focus is, down to the elements of that grant story, how you can put in a comprehensive story, make sure that you have all the pieces and components that create a real vision of the work that you're doing. And then the fourth thing, the final thing we're going to do is kind of put all of it together in a way that makes sense for the folks that are reviewing and reading your grants. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Laura. Okay, so what kind of story do you want to tell? This is something that I think before anybody starts to put pen to paper or starts typing away, really needs to think about when they're putting their story together. A lot of folks have programs they want to focus on. Other folks are looking for general funding. And there are a few different ways to kind of frame your story so that it makes sense to funders. And there are many types of stories that we could tell within the grant writing world, but we're going to focus on three types of the most common types that I come across, especially when it comes to arts, nonprofits, and individual artists. So, Laura, we can go next slide. So, the common types of grant stories that I have come across are future stories, cultural stories, and personal stories, right? Future stories really think about like the long-term impacts of your work. You have a vision for the future of your community. You have a vision for the future of your organization and how your work will impact the people that you're looking to help in the long run. So it's a bigger picture type of story. And sometimes those can be a little hefty of a lift, but I've seen quite a bit of grant writing stories that really focus in on the future vision of their work. The second category, the cultural component, is more about creating connections and collaborations within the community. It really focuses on behaviors. So either changing behaviors, changing systems, bringing together a community to create that change that you want to see. And the third and final piece I think is most important for individual artists is your personal story. And it's in organizations, this will come across too, thinking about how your organization was founded, how the mission is driven, the interest, who you're looking to help. And as far as individual artists, it is your narrative, it is the people who have influenced you, it is the inspiration that you draw, and the folks that you want to inspire and assist and support. Next one. So what goes into a really great grant story? There's a lot of different moving pieces, but I kind of compiled the information into three core elements of a grant that you really should focus on. And I think the first and most important piece is your purpose, summary, or statement. And why do you need one? Because this statement kind of is an all-encompassing picture of what the purpose or what the reason for writing the grant really is. So it helps you to put your purpose up front for the reader. If they don't read anything else, they can look at that purpose statement summary and get a really great idea of what it is that you're trying to do. The second reason is it keeps everything really short and sweet. I know sometimes as a writer, I often tend to be wordy and I usually have to trim things down a lot. So not only does this help keep things really short and sweet and summarizes it for me, it gets right to the heart of the reason why I'm writing the grant. And it helps me to reference back to it and keep the focus of the writing for the rest of the grant and keeps that same tone for the rest of the application as well. So for example, I'm going to say like when I was working with the Cambodian American Literary Arts Association, there's a lot of moving pieces in the work that we do. We're looking to create an archive for future generations through our Still Held zine. We're looking to highlight and uplift authors and writers from the Cambodian diaspora. We're looking to develop writers, so we're running workshops. And so in order to encompass all of those things into a statement, really short and sweet, we look to uplift Cambodian writers of the diaspora and to educate and empower multicultural communities through the literary arts. So you can see how all of those different components get shrunk down into a really general summary so that it's much easier to communicate and much easier to reference back to. A complete picture. The second piece of that is making sure you have all the details in your grant proposal. That means answering all the regular questions and components that come with creating the plot of your story, right? You want to make sure that you have the who, and who does not necessarily just mean the leaders of your organization or the artists involved, but it means any other people that you are partnering with, collaborating with, who you're looking to target as your group of folks that you're doing outreach to and looking to support and offer these services and artistry to. So you want to be able to tell their story as well. So that means looking at some of the different I would say characteristics of the folks that you are looking to reach out to, and also mentioning really what your partners and how your visions align with one another and how you've come together to do this work. And a little bit about also the organization, its history. So making sure that you have the who and all the details involved in that. And then so we also want to make sure that you are describing your program. So it's the what meaning your program and activity, really at the core of it, what kind of activities are you going to carry out? Is there a project that you're looking to complete? Are there going to be events involved in any of the work that you're doing? So you want to be able to outline all of those different components of what the program or activity or project that you're going to complete looks like. Um, and then we're going to move on to like when is this all going to take place? That's pretty self-explanatory. Lots of grantors want to see a timeline. I would say that, things happen with a timeline, so don't feel like if you created a timeline and things don't go as planned or um that you feel that it has to be really like an accurate timeline of what you're doing and you have to follow it to a T. Things are flexible and fluid. As long as you have a general timeline and time frame with some dates and times of when you are going to be completing the work, it's important to put that in there. And if you can be more specific, if you have everything already kind of carved out and you have a schedule, that's even better. But if not, again, like there should be some dates and timelines available as far as how or when you're going to complete that project. Is it within this year? Is it within a few months? Will it not take place till next year? So those things are important to include in that as well. And then where is your program or activity or project going to take place? And that doesn't mean just the location, but also where your areas of impact are going to be. So I think, like, for example, when mass development was in Lowell, specifically working on some economic development and uplifting some of the small businesses within the Merrimack Street corridor. They were very specific about where they wanted these changes or where they wanted their work to take place. They were also very specific about the areas of impact, which meant they were targeting specifically minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, any businesses that were part of a special demographic that needed support, especially after COVID. So anytime you talk about where your project will take place, you want to think about the areas of impact that it will have as well. And areas of impact meaning also communities, not necessarily physical locations, but like, for example, if you're with Cloud, they're looking to really focus in on the Cambodian diaspora and Cambodian writers and multicultural communities. And for CBA, for example, Coalition for a Better Acre, they were very much focused on the neighborhood of the acre and focusing on the folks that are residents and living in the acre neighborhood. Right. And then we have the why. You know, we want to talk about why are we doing this work? What are the needs out there? Is there systemic change that we're looking for? Are we looking to shift some narratives? If there are stories out there that are less than flattering and that we want to change that about a particular group of folks, about an area of the city. We want to make sure that we're including the reasons why this problem or issue exists. And and at the end of that, we want to move into how we're going to change those things and how we're going to go, what resources do we have to allow us to do that? So how also includes any proven methods that we may be incorporating into the work that we're doing. And again, those resources we're talking about, we're not just talking about financial resources. We're talking about volunteers. We're talking about, human resources, people that are coming in to assist us, those collaborations. We're talking about spaces that might be donated to us for free use, or assistance with professional expertise. Somebody might be coming in to help you with marketing. Somebody might be coming in to knock on doors for you and to do outreach. So all of those components go into the how of how you're going to complete the project and how you're going to get the work done. Okay. And the third and final piece that I feel is super, super important is numbers, numbers, and more numbers. And I got to tell you, this one was really difficult for me because I am not a numbers person. Like I mentioned, I am writer by nature. So it was really hard to think about storytelling in terms of numbers. But numbers are so important. And the reason why it's so important to your story is because it helps to highlight the need or issue being addressed. If you can provide data around the subject matter or the issue that you're looking to address, it can really help to show the impact and effectiveness of your proposed methods. It can highlight for you the issues that exist. And then on the other hand, too, any research data around some of the proven methods that have been utilized to address these issues can help show both, again, the issue at hand, how big of an issue it actually is, who it's affecting. So demographic data is also important as well. And then on the other hand, any research or data that has been completed around the work being done on those issues can help to show the effectiveness and impact of the work being done. And last but not least, it provides a really objective viewpoint. A lot of folks feel that numbers don't lie, and therefore they're much more objective than the qualitative data that tends to come out. But the truth of the matter is there needs to be a good combination of both. So a grant story should not be so heavily laden with nothing but data or statistics. It doesn't make it very interesting to read. So you want to balance that out with some of the qualitative data, your testimonies, the stories from folks that have participated in your program prior, or folks who are supporting your work, who feel that strongly about the issues you're looking to address and are in alignment with your work and want to be able to support you in doing that work as well. And what the issue really comes down to when it's data is if you're a small nonprofit organization or you're an individual artist, there is no data to really back up what you're proposing to do, right? Or the work that you've already completed, because oftentimes there's not a capacity for data collection and analysis and computing so that you can actually have that data to show impact of the work that you're doing. So what I've learned in that instance is that you don't need to have that data that is directly coming from the work that you are doing. Data exists out there. You just have to be able to find it. So where I found that you can search out data to add to your grant proposal is through other organizations or individuals that have done similar work that you've done, and they're willing to share, because I know that a lot of folks within the nonprofit network are always looking to help one another out. So all you have to do is kind of do the research and reach out and ask if that data is available for use. The other spaces in which you can find this data is a lot of research journals and studies. And I know some folks are talking about how controversial AI use is, but I think one of the most ethical ways that we can use AI is to do some of that research, because I know how time consuming it can be to go on Google and try to find articles or research that pertains to your work and will back up the work that you're doing. So, as general, I guess, habit of mine now is if I'm looking for research or data, I usually go into ChatGPT and I ask for credible sources around XYZ, depending. For example, I think about storytelling and how it's a healing process or it's very therapeutic for folks. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to give me some articles or data around how the therapeutic values involved in writing and journaling, and how that helps folks heal from a number of mental health disorders, including depression and anxiety. And last but not least, oh, it's okay. The government databases have lots of information on demographics. Sometimes it's not as specific, but there are organizations out there that do trainings that help you kind of pinpoint or are willing to assist you in sorting through some of that data, because it can be overwhelming. But a lot of times you'll find that any of the demographic data that you're looking for happens to be in the census and government databases. And last but not least, taking all those pieces and components and putting it all together in a way that makes sense, not necessarily for you, but makes sense for the folks that are reviewing the grant. Um, I often talk about grant writing as not really intuitive. It's very technical. And so there are differences between like typical storytelling versus grant storytelling. As a natural writer, like, in typical storytelling, the plot really builds up, right? You kind of lay out this map, and then it leads to this climax at the end of your story, and you're like, you have the aha moment at the end. And typical writing can be wordy because you want to be descriptive. You want folks to be able to have an image of the story inside their minds. And so that means the more descriptive it is, the better it is. In grant writing, though, they don't want the buildup. A lot of reviewers look for you to get to the main point right away. So the ending usually comes first, which means whatever conclusion you wanted to make within your grant application, instead of putting it at the bottom, it should be really shifted to the top. And they're looking for you to be less wordies, because a lot of these grant applications have word limitations, character limitations. So it can be very difficult if you are not concise and exact with what you're saying, because there'll be a lot of editing and cutting. And they want just enough details to give them the picture. They don't want too many details where it gets confusing for them and then get off track about what the core purpose of your work really is. And then again, like I mentioned prior, sequence matters. So when we put it all together, you want to lead with that project purpose statement, right? Project purpose, or this, grant statement, because it really, again, hits home right away to the person reviewing your grant of what the purpose of your work really is. And then what I found really useful was this diagram that was provided to me when I was in the early stages of my grant writing, because I tended to, again, through the natural storytelling, kind of build up to the conclusion of what the work really was all about. And folks kept telling me, Sanary, that detail really should be at the forefront. So the inverted pyramid model for, it's a really journalistic way of writing. It puts all of the most important details right at the top, right? And then it moves down to the less important details. Some of it, in the middle there is details that are important and unique, but that without them, the reader still would be able to fully understand the heart or the purpose of your project. And last but not least, with the conclusion, it's nice to have, but it's not really critical. So I think about the grant writing as a standalone prequel or sequel, which means if you have a movie and it's a prequel or a sequel, sometimes it's nice to have context from the other, you know, parts from the other movies, but without those other parts, that movie should be comprehensible and should have all the components so that you don't feel like you're missing anything at all. If that makes sense. So really, at the end of it all, the takeaway from all of this is I really want folks to think about the purpose of their grant application, what's at the heart of the work that you want to accomplish, and really understand that grant writing is technical and not intuitive. It's not the way that most folks would write naturally, but the more you do it, the more it will become natural to you. And always start at the end. Because if you begin with the end, it helps you to stay focused and stay on topic. It gives you a direction and a destination to really head towards with your writing. And last but not least, seek feedback. It helps to make sure that you're not missing any of the details that are important within your application, and you get feedback on whether or not it was easy to read and or understand. Okay. And that is what I have for folks. I hope that the information is useful.
Sanary,
And
did you want me to show that grant, the one
yes,
pager that okay, so I've got to stop
please.
share for a moment so I can share another resource here that we'll send it out in our follow-up email, but see if I can
So for folks
move
who don't
it.
have a lot of experience with grant writing, I love this application. This is Philanthropy Massachusetts Common Grant Application. A lot of organizations have adopted this grant application. It really is kind of the staple grant language that you will see in most applications and all the information that generally it gets asked for standard grants. And it's very easy to read through, very straightforward. I hope that foundation and grantors, the majority of them will adopt this application because it's very easy to read through. So you
And
can
some
see the ask for.
Yeah, I know that's something, when I was going through a fundraising class at one point, um, starting with something like this, and especially for your organization, putting together and answering these questions, even though you don't have a grant that you're going for in the moment, sort of helps you think through those components and telling the story of your organization. Obviously, you're going to also then maybe write grants for specific projects and programs, but it will give you a little bit of practice. And, even if they're not using this exact common application, you'll probably see a lot of similar questions and you can pull from that language.
I think we do have some questions in the chat. I just want to make sure
Yep.
that
So I'm going to go back to the main thing. Okay. So we've got, okay. Do you support individual or small organizations during the grant application process? I'm not sure if that means you specifically, Sanary, or Mosaic.
um
Um, yeah, go ahead.
I don't, so I know, Laura, you can answer for Mosaic and then I can
Sure.
answer for myself if you want.
Yeah, sure. So from Mosaic's perspective, some people may be aware we do have a quarterly mini grant program, which is up to $1,000. And it is something that individual artists can also apply and access. Um, so for that specifically, we are willing to help folks. So Mosaic is a large team of two, myself and Jess O'Hearn. We don't review the grants, so I'm always willing to look at your grant ahead of time and give you some feedback based on what I've seen and the types of projects that I've seen our selection committee review and look for there. So there is some support, at least specifically for our grant programs.
And as of right now, I have been taking on grant consulting work, but on a very selective basis, because I do work full time for an organization and am volunteering. But if you are looking for assistance, there are some grant consulting organizations out there that will sit with you through at least one session for a grant as kind of a, I guess it's like a promotional a thing as well, but it's also a way to aid smaller nonprofits who might not have a budget to bring a grant consultant on to get some assistance as well. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think I saw someone
Yeah, is it
asking,
possible to share a sample grant? So we
I
do
have
have,
one.
you do have one, that would be great. I can send that out. And then also, Sanary mentioned some other resources on the Mosaic Lowell website. So when you go on our main page, I think the menu is for creatives, and there's a library section, which has tons of information, including stuff about grant writing. We ran a webinar about a year or two ago that covered very sort of soup to nuts grant writing. Um, so that recording is there. I believe the slides are there. And then that presenter also put together a template that you could utilize as well. So it's not a sample grant, it's a grant template that you could download. And I can also link to that as well.
And I recently submitted a grant application to gosh, it's called A for Arts, and I submitted it for class. I will happily share that grant application
That'd be
so
great.
folks can get an idea of how I weave some data and history and into the stories and into the grant story, the grant application. Because
Great.
sometimes I'm the same way. I would need like an example so I can have an idea of
Hmm.
how what the writing looks and how the flow looks in those applications.
Yeah. Then question, is it better to give a personal story and then connect to bigger cultural themes and issues?
I think specifically for individual artists, yes. I think that if you can tie your personal story to a larger issue within your community that you're looking to address, it helps to not only show the motivation and drive behind your work, but it also shows how you're looking to connect with the community and what you're looking to offer them through your artistry, right? For example, I think about my work with Ka a lot because I'll tell you honestly, the reason why I went into grant writing and development work was because I was volunteering for CLA and I felt so passionate about the organization and the work that they were doing that I wanted to be able to help in any way possible. And so it was very personal for me, the motivation behind joining CLA and doing the writing. I always felt that it was important to uplift stories of the folks in my community. It started with my mother's story because I just felt like she had this really unique experience and people didn't understand. And I knew that other people in the Cambodian community had very similar stories, but they were not always able to share them, especially not through writing, because a lot of the women in my cultural community were not afforded the opportunity for education. So they did not read or write in my native language or in English. And so it was important for me to be able to help them tell their stories and advocate for them and have folks understand where they were coming from. So that and then addressing the broader issue of like healing from trauma and folks who are survivors of war and genocide. It just painted a broader picture and tied it to my own personal work and involvement with it.
Yeah. And I would add too that sometimes um, the answer to that question might come in with the grant proposal, right? And the ask. Um, so like the Mosaic mini grant is very broad, right? Whereas some grants are looking to target specific populations or specific problems. And so for an organization like CBA, for example, where they do a lot and everything they do can be tied to different challenges and different societal issues. And so sometimes, you look at, okay, here are all the problems we solve as an organization, or here are all the things I do as an artist. Oh, this grant is really interested in this. So I'm going to connect my story to that. those are the data points I'm going to pull in. Um, and that, like I said, that will change based on what the grant opportunity is, and what type of stuff that they're looking to fund.
And that's to say, there aren't a lot of grants out there for individual artists or personal stories. And Mosaic is unique in that way, where they will support individual artists, and so their grant application is great practice for a lot of individual artists. And if they're looking to apply for larger grants for larger foundations, they can apply what they were able to utilize, put into the Mosaic grant application and expand on that for larger grant
Yeah.
opportunities.
And I will say, another resource we do have on our website, and people feel free to also continue to ask questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute and raise your hand and ask verbally, you can do that as well. But we do have um, a section where we post grant opportunities. And so this is a little bit of a pitch and some stuff that folks should be aware of, particularly the individual artists on the call. The Mass Cultural Council, right now, they have their individual artist grant opportunity available. It's a $5,000 grant specifically for individual artists for their practice. Um, and the other grant opportunity that's open right now, aside from the Mosaic mini grants, because that's sort of a rolling, every quarter we review and award, but it's you can apply anytime, um, is the Lowell Cultural Council. And so the Lowell Cultural Council, their funding comes from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Um, so Mass Cultural Council gives buckets of money to each community within the state, that has a local cultural council, and they award funds to individuals, nonprofits, unincorporated groups. So if you have a volunteer group trying to get a festival together, I know we've got some festival folks on here, including the brand new Salvadorian Festival, which is amazing, that you were able to join, and congrats on a wonderful first festival. Um, and so that's a great opportunity. The Lowell Cultural Council grants are due mid-October, and in just under 2 weeks on September 30th, we are doing an info session which will cover information about the Mosaic Lowell grant as well as the Lowell Cultural Council grant. So we'll have folks from the Cultural Council on the line to talk about that opportunity. And then I'll be talking a bit more about budgeting and putting together a budget for your grant. Um, the Mosaic Lowell grant template that we ask you to use is based off of the Cultural Council grant template. And we did that very intentionally. One, not to reinvent the wheel. And two, it is something that is used for these larger Cultural Council grants, like the $5,000 individual grant, and then also the local Cultural Council grants as well. Other questions? Okay,
And what I really
fantastic.
appreciate that Mosaic is doing, Laura, is really looking at all the different pieces and components of the grant. I mean, storytelling is just one piece, but also there is a whole methodology from researching the grant and making sure that it aligns with the work that you're doing, all the way down through the grant application process, the budget, because again, I'm not a numbers person. So putting
Mhm.
together a proposal, you definitely need somebody that has some know-how about numbers and creating the budget. And as someone who has reviewed Mosaic's grants, it's not, I've heard a lot of feedback regarding, oh, well, I applied and I didn't get the grant. And I said, as a reviewer, I work really hard to give feedback on what's missing and why I would score a little bit lower on certain sections of the grant. It was just because there were certain components that were missing. So this presentation really kind of put together all the things I learned as I was going through grant writing, and also thinking about what I saw that was missing from folks' applications when I was reviewing them, and what I would have liked to had to get a clearer picture of what the project was really all about and
Yeah.
what their work was all about.
Yeah. And, this is sort of a little more nuts and bolts, but Mosaic grant, if you don't receive a grant, we tell folks, let us know if you want feedback, and we go to those reviewer comments. So if this has happened to you with a Mosaic grant, or in the future, if it does, always ask for feedback, and we will get it to you. Um, we'll cover this in the info session, but you can apply to a Mosaic mini grant every quarter. Um, you can only get one a year, but every quarter. And a lot of other grants, you can ask if they have feedback on your application. Not every organization um, has the capacity to spend that time and give you that feedback, but some will. Um, so the worst they're going to say is, no, we can't give you the feedback. But the best thing is you're going to get some feedback and strengthen the next application. So, all right. Great. Well,
I have
thank
a
you,
question.
Sanary.
I
Oh,
have a
go
question
ahead.
before we leave,
Yes,
real
of
quick.
course.
So I run the Puerto Rican festival,
Mhm.
and but it's not just a festival. We also have a group of girls and boys, young kids, teenagers that are learning to dance a cultural dance from Puerto Rico.
Hmm.
Is there other grants besides festivals that we can apply for in order to be able to get, these kids like the typical dresses, things for them to help out the family with the costs of like the uniforms because they will not only be dancing at our festival, but at other festivals. We'll try to showcase them at other festivals as well.
Oh, there are definitely grant opportunities out there for something like that. I want to say there are, for example, I think the Latino Community Fund through the Boston Foundation supports organizations that are serving predominantly Hispanic and Latino communities, and they will they have different grant cycles. Laura, I don't know if Mosaic offers any workshops on grants research and
We
procurement
haven't
and
done
where to
one.
find those
Yeah.
grant opportunities that align? Because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people talk about these grant databases, but I've never, in the years that I've been doing grant writing and development work, I really did not find those databases very useful.
Mhm. Yeah, there's some, I think it's covered sort of briefly in our overview one, and there many of the databases you can utilize because they're typically a paid membership, but a lot of the libraries you can access them. So I think the Lowell Public Library, I believe, has access to one. There's actually the Associated Grant Makers has a library in Boston, so if getting to Boston is accessible, and they have people there too to sort of help you, and they're very specific on grant searching. And I will also say to look for, in this case, right, you're looking for grant opportunities that target youth, um,
Yes.
and grants that are or projects that are serving youth tend to be I don't want to say plentiful, right? Because everyone's always fighting for funding, but it is sort of an easier topic to find granting organizations for.
And
Okay. Thank you.
I would also encourage you to subscribe to some of the philanthropy networks newsletters. For example, the Mass Nonprofit Network tends to put out a lot of different grant opportunities. If you scroll down to the bottom of their newsletter, there's generally quite a few grant opportunities down at the bottom of that. Philanthropy Massachusetts and their newsletter will send out grant opportunities as well. I'm trying to think of other
Yeah,
organizations.
we try to post some.
Mhm.
And then if you're able to access the chat, um, Sam put in an opportunity that looks like the deadline may have just passed, but it's the New England Dance Fund from the New England Foundation for the Arts. And that's typically they keep their grant programs the same each year. So if it was offered this year, it likely will be an opportunity next year as well too. So you can always take a look at that and um, put it on your calendar. All right. I
Yeah,
know
because
Ozzo has
different
a question too. Oh, go ahead, Sanary.
I was gonna say the different foundations do a couple of grant cycles a year, so just keep an eye on their website or, look into the website itself and it'll give you some information on when those applications might be coming out so you can keep an eye on them.
Great. And Azo had a
Okay, thank
question.
you.
You're
You're
welcome.
welcome.
Hi, thank you, Sanary, and Laura. So I was just wondering, so we're planning an event through Llama, and Solidarity Lowell is helping out with this art event. And I think it would take place before I would get an answer back on a grant. So have you ever seen it like paid out retroactive to an event happening? Like, I guess front it, have all the receipts available and kind of produce those along sort of with a grant application and say, hey, we had this event, it was a big hit in the community and can,
I have not seen a lot of retroactive grants. There are a few, let's say, if you put the application in and then their grant cycle, they make a decision later and you've already started your planning phase. I've seen that, but not that a project has been completed and then you're asking for funds to support it after. It doesn't usually happen that way. That's why a lot of folks have, grant writing is not quick money. I'll give you an example. When we did Mackenzie Scott's yield giving grant, that was over a year before we got an answer from them. So it all depends on the cycles of that the grantors are working under. Some folks do quarterly, like Mosaic does quarterly grants. Some folks do biannual, so they do like a fall and a spring. So it's more of like making sure that you are looking ahead and and doing the research around the grant funding and how it will align with the timeline of your project.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the only, right, like let's say your project is happening October 15th and you get the word about the grant September 30th, and they're not actually cutting checks until October 30th, October 31st, right? Like you can get the actual money in your hands after your project, but in terms of the application, the decision should come beforehand. But stories, photos, and all of that from your first event make a super, like a much stronger application, right? Like that's all stuff then that can go into the next round.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We probably have time for one more question if anyone has one. And okay. Well,
If folks
Sanary,
think of anything after,
thank
my
you.
email will be available. So you can email me and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible with an answer if I have one. If not, hopefully I can point you in the right direction to a resource that might be able to help you.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Sanary. Be on the lookout, everybody, for a follow-up email with the recording, resources, tons of information, plus a survey. We will send you a survey to get a little bit of feedback on this session. And I will also send a link to how to register for that info session that we're doing on the 30th, if that's something of interest to you. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.